as a leader, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes.
Ultimately, you need to be able to put faith in your team.
It's about coaching and mentoring. It's about being collaborative.
You have to be able to encourage your team to reach their potential.
Hello, I'm Kritika Adatia and I'm a chartered accountant. I now support accountancy students through their training. And as an educator, I'm regularly up close and personal with some of the common issues people face while studying for and sitting their accountancy exams. So in this series for the ACCA, I'm chatting with experts about strategies we can all use when facing some of life's challenges. This week, we're looking at leadership. What does it mean to be a good leader? What does a career in leadership entail? And how can we spot opportunities to develop our leadership skills in our day-to-day lives? This is On Your Marks, because you'll never know until you try. When you're just starting out in your career, the idea of stepping into a leadership role can feel like a distant goal. For some, it's not even on the radar, whilst for others, it's the ultimate aspiration. No matter where you stand on the leadership spectrum, developing those skills can prove fruitful, both personally and professionally. To me, leadership isn't just about holding a certain job title. It's about so much more than that. Whilst I do have a team that reports to me now, I realised I was embodying the qualities of a leader long before that. Even in the classroom, guiding students and helping them build the knowledge and skills to succeed in their exams, I was leading in my own way. To unpack leadership and what this means, I'm really excited to be joined by Helen Brand. She's the Chief Executive of ACCA and has been leading the organisation since 2008. So Helen, did you always want to be a leader?
I don't think I consciously thought to myself, I must be a leader. But I did find myself, sixer of my brownie pack and leading head girl at school and games captain, those kinds of things. So I guess the signs were there that I was going to thrive in leadership positions. And I've always enjoyed that and always enjoyed the responsibility that comes with it. So I guess I was more focused on doing what people wanted me to do, having a sense of achievement and moving forward. And that might have translated itself into leadership.
That sounds like signs of a good leader to me, actually. And just touching a little bit about your journey and how you came into the leadership position at ACCA.
Well, I think one of my most formative experiences, before I entered the workforce was when I was a student union president. So at my university, I had to get elected and become a leader. And I found myself aged 21, running at bars and day nurseries and having to talk to vice chancellors and all these kinds of things, which were extremely formative. And I think took the fear away. I think it was really an important moment for me in that not much was going to scare me in the future in terms of the circumstances that I was finding myself in. But I was really, that was a safe space, in the student union, and I wasn't hopefully ruining lives or ruining a business. It was a really important step for me to take that. And then I went into the workforce looking for opportunities in the international sphere, and I was very interested in international development and what was happening outside the UK and the role that the UK played in that. And actually, the accountancy profession is a fantastic model of where you truly can have a global profession. So I kind of went into professional bodies through that development route. That's how I joined ACCA as the head of international development with a very visionary chief executive, a woman leader, which was probably significant, Anthea Rose, and she gave me lots of opportunities, and I took lots of opportunities to do different roles. At one time, I find myself in charge of finance and IT, as well as having done that international development role, and then went through the very rigorous selection process to become chief executive off the back of that experience that I gained and came into the role. So that's what happened at ACCA.
What about mentors? Were there any influential people in your journey that helped shape, I suppose, how you are as a leader?
Yeah, very much so. And I keep saying I've been fortunate, but I have, in terms of the role models that have been there in front of me. Different kinds of role models. So Anthea Rose, who was the first female chief executive of ACCA, she recruited me into ACCA, and I was reporting to her directly right at the beginning. But her kind of can-do attitude, and she was unapologetic about wanting to be absolutely the best, the organisation to be the best it could possibly be, and the members to be the best they could possibly be. And she was an inspiration and spent a lot of time focused on me. If you told her she was a mentor, she wouldn't have she wouldn't have thought of that, but certainly that's what I was experiencing, and that was fantastic. Earlier in my career, both male and female, and I think that's important for women. Your mentor or the person guiding you need to always be a woman. So I've been very fortunate to have advice from senior men and women on how to progress my career. So always seek that out. It doesn't have to be a formal arrangement. Sometimes it will be a formal arrangement. Sometimes your organisation will help you match with a mentor, and I'd always advise doing that if you have the opportunity. But just seeking out those people who you admire, who are achieving things, and who have an interest in you, I think it would make a huge difference.
That's really great. I mean, you speak about your journey, and it sounds something similar to what we discussed on an earlier episode with Helen Tapper about squiggly careers. So it's not been quite linear. You sort of found yourself into leadership positions through various different experiences.
I think that's really, really important. I think the idea of that kind of straight line to the top, whatever that might be in your ambitions, I think that's gone now. And it really is about finding those experiences, A, that you enjoy, which is really, really important, but B, that build you and build your capabilities, give you new ideas, keep you fresh. Because I've worked for one organisation for a long time, of course, working at ACCA, and I've been chief executive since 2008. However, within all of that, you're doing something different every day, every month, every year. There are new challenges. The world brings us challenges, and it's how you prepare yourself for that, which is so important. And that's very rarely to do with a hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really great to know. It seems like you've also embraced all the learnings along the way as well, which again is something else we touched on in an earlier episode. What I wanted to ask you is, what in your opinion makes for a great leader?
Well, I think there isn't one version of a leader, so that's a really important point. And I think sometimes we can fall into a trap of a stereotypical view of what a leader might be, a little bit authoritarian, a little bit macho, taking tough decisions. Well, you do have to take tough decisions, but there are lots of different ways of doing that. So I think what's fantastic now is that people being their authentic selves can move into leadership roles and do that in a very different way. With all of them, though, I think authenticity is really important, because if you're trying too hard to be something you're not, it doesn't ring true with people. And part of the art of leadership, of course, is taking people with you. And I think that, you can only do that if you're being true to yourself. I think the art of listening, of course, is so important in leadership, and demonstrating that you're acting on that listening and that it's real, that people understand, they can see that your actions come from that. And empathy, for what people are going through. I think these, the days of only work and your life stays out of work are also gone. And so people being happy in their work, being engaged, feeling productive and positive, I think if you're creating the environment for people to thrive, then you're doing a good job as a leader.
Yeah. What does leadership mean to you? So we've spoken about the qualities that you think make for a good leader, but what does leadership mean to you?
For me, I'm very practical. Okay, so for me, leadership is, can you lead an organisation or lead a team or lead a group? You don't have to be the chief executive, but can you achieve what you set out to achieve through that leadership? So having that ambition, having that vision, having the goals, and then motivating everybody to deliver on that. For me, that feels very rewarding. So, at ACCA, we have a really ambitious strategy. We operate globally. It's very complex. But we do set out to the world. We say to the world, this is what we're going to achieve. This is what we're going to do. And I think as a leader, if you can find the ways to do that, that's very rewarding. And people then engage with the organisation and they're very happy as well, I hope.
So it seems with what you're saying, you don't necessarily need the title to be able to say or be a leader, really.
No, I've talked to ACCA for some time about leadership at all levels. So of course, there are specific roles, and we have spans of management, and it is important to have those structures so that we can function as an organisation. But wherever you are, you can demonstrate leadership. You can have a new idea, you can change the way things are being done to make them more efficient. And again, it's not always in the very glamorous areas. It's not always about, finding a new market or delivering a new product. It can be making a process that we've had for about 15 years, say, eureka, we can do this, in a far more effective and efficient fashion. Fantastic. That's and taking people with you. I keep saying taking people with you because that's so important. You can't. Leadership isn't done in isolation. So creating a team around you or bringing other teams with you is a fantastic piece of leadership. And people can do that wherever they are in organisations. I think.
It actually reminds me of something I read. It might have been on LinkedIn, where it was like a leader will make you feel important, but a manager will make themselves feel important. And it seems like that's what we're trying to get at here, isn't it? Taking the people along, making them feel appreciated and valued. Now, we've spoken about great qualities of a leader, what leadership means to you. Obviously, leadership comes with its own challenges. And obviously, being a woman in a leadership position, especially in the accountancy space, I'm sure there must have been challenges along the way. So would you be able to share what some of those challenges might have been for you?
Yeah. I've been extremely fortunate in working in organisations where my values have generally aligned with them, and where, women having families or carers or whoever have been, nurtured and supported rather than rejected. So I'm very fortunate. I recognise that, and I hope I'm passing it back and passing it on to the next generations of women coming through. I think one of the things I talk about is always, if someone's opened the door for you, then hold it open for the next person coming along behind you. So that's really critical. I had 2 children. I was a single mother, so it's kind of that's a challenge, whatever environment that you're in. But what I always say to people is, it's the support network you put around you, whatever kind of support that is. So I think trying not to think you have to do everything on your own, and also understanding that you might outperform as a chief executive one day, you might underperform as a mother the same day. But the other day, you'll be fantastic as a mother, and the chief executive bit might take a bit of a back seat. Or, I don't know, if you love going to the theatre, you might not be going to the theatre as much for a while, but that will come round again. So I think it's that balance piece, and not feeling... I think women beat themselves up massively to be performing at the absolute top level in everything that they're doing all the time. And that's not right, I was on a panel talking about female leadership once, and I think, well, a few people were laughing when I said, I think women have to be comfortable with being as mediocre as men are. So it's mediocre, and by that I mean, you're average, which a lot of people are average, but they can be quite comfortable in their job and quite confident, etc. So you're not performing at some exceptional level the whole time, but you are capable of being exceptional when it matters, when it really matters, when it's really important, and that's in aspects of your work and in aspects of your life. So don't beat yourself up. That's my main message.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that so candidly as well, particularly that piece about you can be mediocre and still feel okay about it, because I do feel sometimes I myself have always felt I need to perform to a certain level to prove myself, to And maybe women feel that a little bit more.
You don't have to prove yourself every day.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So let's, and I think ultimately, being happy in this, we spend so much of our life working. You have to, most of the time, and of course you're not going to be ecstatic all the time either, so we have to, but most of the time you have to feel good about your daily work and what you're doing. So I think that really, you really have to give yourself the chance to enjoy it.
Helen, were there any fears for you stepping into a leadership role?
Yes, I had plenty of fears. And I think this is where, we talk about being authentic, but you can train yourself to do some things that you're not that comfortable with, but are part of the role that you're going for. And that's very important because we know quite often women in particular will look at job descriptions and discount themselves because they think there are all these things they can't do, rather than saying, well, I can do 50, 60% of it and I'll train myself or learn how to do the other 40%. So I think it's really important. I personally, I'm not a people person, really, so this is, so I enjoy achieving things and getting things done. And I was always very driven by that and being successful, but not really that extrovert or wanting to be on the stage. My sister, so she was a jazz singer and she was in all the school plays and all of that kind of thing, where I'm like, no, I'll be in the background making sure that the scenery works or whatever it is. So going on to a stage to do public speaking was a thing for me that was particularly tricky. I had to do quite a lot of training and work and 3 deep breaths and all of that. And now I still feel nervous. They always say if you don't feel a little bit nervous, it's probably not going to go that well. But, it's part of my job and I do it very regularly and hopefully successfully for ACCA. But yeah, you do sometimes have to train yourself to overcome those fears, but don't let those fears hold you back from progressing and doing what it is you really want to do in your career.
Yeah, that's really reassuring, I'm sure, for our listeners who are perhaps a bit more introverted. Mm-hmm. That idea that you don't want to let your fears hold you back. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Obviously, you've had quite an interesting career. You've had different roles, different leadership positions. How has your leadership style evolved over the years?
Okay, the truth, when I was younger, I was extremely judgmental. Okay, so I would decide within a nanosecond whether I thought somebody was good or bad or whether something was right or wrong. I was like, okay, absolutely, I know, and I would move on very quickly. I think I have learned that listening and understanding the different perspectives is more and more important. And it was important then as well. I just had to learn that. So I think I think my style is more consultative. And I certainly have placed a great emphasis on team. So I've always thought that I can only thrive if the team is the best it can possibly be, the team around me. But then how you make that team effective, you have to have that. Different styles for different people. So being able to adjust the way that you're interacting and take in different perspectives. So I'm not as quick to judge as I used to be.
That adaptive leadership style is really important as well, isn't it? Because you do get different people, different preferences in the organisation, and just being able to manage that, I can imagine, is a challenge in a leadership role.
Within the UK, but of course globally,
yes,
we have very different cultures, different mindsets, different ways that people will be approaching the work, the way that they will view success or failure or what they want to get out of work. So yeah, you have to listen and you have to learn.
Yeah. What's been the best piece of advice someone's given to you, Helen?
Well, if I go back to that team point, someone once said to me that you will have the perfect team for about a week every 5 years. And I think that's what he meant by that was that everybody has different pressures. And as I said, not everybody's going to be performing at the absolute top level all the time consistently, and certainly not your team. So we were discussing the importance of having, and I'm so fortunate to be, the executive board of ACCA, fantastic. But we'll all agree that sometimes some of us are up, sometimes some of us are not so up. So that was really important for me, again, because I'm not striving constantly for absolute perfection in the team. We have to perform to a very high level, of course, but yeah, it was that crushing blow that it was only going to be perfect for a week every 5 years, which is a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point.
Yeah. So this idea that we shouldn't always be striving for perfection, that comes back to the point you were saying earlier as well about, when we were talking about challenges for women and thinking about being okay with mediocre and not perfectionism. You mentioned obviously having a team that might just be perfect once every 5 years. So, I'm sure through your career you might have dealt with tricky or challenging individuals or leaders. How do we deal with those situations or those individuals? Have you got any tips for that?
Tips. I'd say don't rise to it, so I don't know if there are lots of different ways of being tricky. I like the way you put it, but there are lots of different ways of being tricky. If somebody's just plain, rude or wrong or refusing to take the evidence or whatever it might be, I'd say don't rise to it, and also don't take it personally. This is something in terms of resilience that we all need to have. I think understanding that very often that person will have a reason for why they're behaving like that. They'll have an objective that you don't quite understand, or you do understand, but it's completely contrary to what you want to happen. It's that they think they're doing the right thing usually. So I think not rising to that. However, I think being consistent in your own views, position, information, however the other person is behaving, is really important. So, I think that consistency, know what it is that your values are, and, stay strong and be true to that. And don't start trying to mirror the behaviour that you might see as bad behaviour in front of you, because I think that only goes the wrong way.
Yeah. And that actually circles back to something you were talking about with authenticity in your point earlier, right? And I really like the point you mentioned about realizing that the other person might be acting in that way because of something else that's happening. And we do need to be cognizant of that people do have lives outside of work, and something might be triggering them to behave in that way.
Yeah. They have lives outside work, but they also have different objectives sometimes, so it's, they're trying to find a way to win the argument or the deal or whatever it might be that's going on. So, I think understanding their perspective, but not being sucked into feeling you have to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking about our listeners who might be aspiring ACCA students. We know that a lot of our members go on to hold leadership positions, whether it's an FD or an FC, maybe a chief exec like
many
yourself.
Many of them are chief executives.
And we're 250,000 plus members strong now, which is fantastic. So how do you think the ACCA qualification empowers the leaders of tomorrow or our future leaders?
Well, there are two things really there. One is, I think the actual qualification is really deep and broad in the skill sets that it brings to you. And we very deliberately called that final level strategic professional. That's not an accident, because that's what we are creating. So you have those fantastic accounting and finance fundamentals and underpinning, which are going to help you in any career and any executive board or corporate board that you might be sitting on. That's going to be really important. But that strategic thinking and forward thinking and the bringing together and synthesis of information aligned with the technology that we put into the qualification now and the sustainability. So the content of the qualification is all there. The second thing, though, I'd say is that you become part of a profession. And that is so important in building the skills that might bring you onto those senior leadership roles in the future. So you have a ready-built network. You are constantly provided with continuing professional education, so you can upgrade your skills continually. ACCA prides itself on being forward-thinking. We're scanning the horizon constantly to give members the capability and information they need to succeed in this, very changed world that we're all living in. So the qualification itself, but then being a professional and being part of that professional network, I think is so important.
Yeah, that network and being able to tap into that network. And I know we do a lot at ACCA to just connect the members within our community as well.
Well, the peer-to-peer learning is always, so important. And we have so many different communities that you can be part of, whether it's in your sector, whether it's in your country or region of a country, or a global or international network. So whichever way is going to be useful or interesting to you, there's a way to connect, to learn and grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, just coming back to Helen, sort of your work and experiences, and obviously you have such a busy life. I'm sure your calendar must be packed with meetings and engagements. How do you manage work and your life? You mentioned you've also got kids. So how do you deal with the work-life balance?
Well, I'm pleased to say that the children are adults now, so that's great. They're thriving and happy in their way. That work-life balance thing again, I think for me it's always been important to have a hinterland, interests that are nothing to do with the day-to-day job. And I always advise people, if your whole existence is only focused on your job, you're probably not going to be as good at your job as you could be. And I think it's going to be really challenging. So for me, I'm a lifelong Liverpool FC supporter. So even just sitting down to watch the game and being totally engrossed in that and feeling like it's life and death whether Liverpool win a football match, actually is very good for me because it's a totally different thing from work. Reading the arts, novels, cooking, if I can find the time to make a meal nicely and properly, I really love that because, again, it's completely take you out. And actually, since the pandemic, I've become a gardener. So before the pandemic, I knew there was a patch of land outside the back of my house. I had nothing to do with it. But I have, really become quite just enjoying the seasons, enjoying the planting, seeing what you can do, understanding the importance now, trying to plant pollinators for the bees and things things that I wouldn't have crossed my mind before. So it is about all that. For me, it's filling my time with things that are productive, enjoyable, and very different from what I might do in my job.
And that's great because, again, just circling back to our earlier episode with Helen, she mentioned, Helen Tapper, our careers coach, she mentioned something very similar to what you said, that you've got to have a life outside of work. And only then you're going to be able to perform just as well at work as well. Now, I'm a foodie, so I'm going to pick up on something you said about cooking. Do you have a favourite recipe that you cook or that you'll go to or you would serve if you were hosting a dinner party?
Yeah, I do enjoy cooking coq au vin.
Okay.
Very traditional, very, very, but this is a Delia Smith recipe from centuries ago that I first cooked when I was about 20. But I've kept cooking it. So it's that you get that one thing, don't you, that you think, okay, this is going to be okay, and it's going to feed lots of people, and it's all right. So yeah, that's probably my one go-to.
I like that.
Yeah.
Stick with the recipe,
Yeah.
For me, it'll be a paneer dish then.
Right, very good.
All right, now just to kind of wrap up with one of the final questions I have, I'm thinking about our listeners that might have aspirations to become leaders. How might they make it known in their organisation that they want to get into leadership? Is there something they should be doing, saying?
Well, first of all, don't keep your head down. I think that sometimes we just think if we keep our head down and do our job very, very well, that's going to be enough. I think keep your head up and look for the opportunities. There are always new projects, new things happening. There's a problem in the organisation that needs fixing, that needs a new perspective. Always put your hand up, and this was certainly my experience, that there were some knotty problems or big things that needed doing, and everyone went quiet and put their head down, and I put my hand up, not having a clue how I was really going to do it, but it takes you forward and gets you noticed. So that's one thing. I think also there'll very often be programs within organisations and leadership frameworks, talent frameworks. Organisations really want to help people to be successful. They want to invest in you. Sometimes they don't know you have that ambition. So talk to your managers, talk to leaders, because leaders are trying to communicate all the time and connect, and use that opportunity. Lots of people in ACCA have, from all over different parts of the organisation, we've ended up talking about their careers and how they can progress, and that's led to something else happening. So use every interaction you have, every opportunity to have that conversation. Don't be afraid. The worst that can happen is somebody says no, and that doesn't matter. You'll have another opportunity another time.
Yeah, it's not fearing the no, and like you say, just seeking out those opportunities.
Yeah, take a bit of a risk.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Helen. I'm going to end with asking you, what would be your 3 top tips for a good leader?
Okay, well, I'm going to steal shamelessly from ACCA's current behaviour framework, because we're asking everybody at ACCA to behave according to these 3 behaviours at the moment. And I think they apply to leadership at all levels, like we were talking about earlier. So be encouraging, be confident, and be forward-thinking. And I think if you bring those 3 together at any stage of your career, you're going to succeed in leadership.
Brilliant. So confident, forward-thinking, encouraging, fantastic. Thank you so much, Helen, for that conversation.
Thank you.
That's it from this week's episode of On Your Marks. Thank you, Helen, for chatting with me today. And actually, that's it from season 2. Thanks for joining us. I hope you found it useful. We'd love it if you could rate and review the show, and you can find us on our social media by clicking the links in the show notes, where you can also find a link to the video version of this podcast. For more information about ACCA exams, you can go to www.accaglobal.com/exams. I'm Kritika Adatia, and this has been On Your Marks.